Hi guys, welcome back to Prayer and Penguins. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favourite topics to talk about, which is leading prayers in church. I think this is such an important ministry, such an important part of what we do at church. To lead prayer and to model prayer and to encourage prayer and to pray on behalf of your community in this way. And we want to equip you to be able to lead prayers in your church in ways that are fun, in ways that reveal new ways of praying to the people in your church, and that help them to pray for the things that matter to them. So in this video I have 5 different prayer ideas to share with you, and these are all ideas that I've actually used in the past kind of 6 months or so, most of them actually much more recent than that, in the last couple of months. So I have tried these, I have tested these, I've got some top tips, and hopefully you'll find this helpful to give you some ideas for how you can lead prayers at church. So let's dive straight in. My first idea is gingerbread men prayers, and what you need for this is some gingerbread men and some icing, some ready roll icing. So this is a prayer idea that I used over Christmas, but you don't have to use it over Christmas, just gingerbread men are definitely easy to find around Christmas. But if you can get your hands on them, you could use this any time of year. I also did this in a kind of cafe style service where everyone had a table, which should make it a lot easier because people had that table in front of them to work on. So just something to think about when you're planning this. But the idea of the prayer idea is that you use your gingerbread man to focus on someone that you want to pray for. It could be an individual person, or it could be a group of people, for example. And then you use your ready roll icing to model something, create something that you're praying that God will provide for that person. So some examples could be making a blanket out of icing for homeless people to represent warmth and comfort that you're praying God will provide for them. Or it could be creating bandages for someone to represent praying for healing for them. Or I know when we did this in December, some people made doves to represent peace for different groups of people that are experiencing conflict and terror and war. If you had more time to do this, you could also use kind of icing pens to decorate that person and really make it into that person that you're praying for to help you focus on who it is that you're praying for. And when I did this prayer idea, I just found it worked really, really well to get people thinking about who they were praying for and what they were praying that God would provide for that person or for that group of people. There were some really great conversations afterwards, people chatting about what they created and who they were praying for and what that looks like, being able to talk about our prayers and talk about what it is that's on our hearts. And there was also someone in our congregation who said, "Who knew prayer could be this fun?" which I'm taking as a big compliment, so thanks. And as a bonus for this prayer idea, you can eat your gingerbread men and icing afterwards. My next idea is the 5-finger prayer idea, and what you need for this prayer is nothing. So the idea of this prayer idea is to work through your kind of 5 fingers, and each one represents something different. So your thumb, you can do a thumbs up with, so you pray prayers of thanks and praise and gratitude, all about the good things that are going on. Your forefinger points the way, so you pray for wisdom and pray for those who share wisdom, like teachers, doctors, those kinds of people. Your middle finger is your tallest finger, so you pray for leaders. That could be local leaders, leaders in your church. It could be leaders of your country and world leaders as well. Your ring finger is your weakest finger, which I did fact check before doing that, and yes, it apparently is the weakest finger. So you pray for the vulnerable, people who are in need, people who are ill or injured, people who need support in different ways. And then your little finger is your smallest finger, your closest finger, and you pray for yourself. And that could be praying for ourselves individually or kind of corporately, our church as well. To note, of course, not everybody does have 5 fingers on their hands, whether due to injury, illness, disability. There's lots of different reasons that might be the case. So I think it is important that we think about that and are careful with the language that we use. It doesn't mean we can't do this prayer idea. I just think we need to think it through before we do it, particularly if you know there is someone in your congregation who doesn't have 5 fingers. But also, even if you don't, avoiding things like, of course we all have 5 fingers, because that isn't true, and it can be useful to avoid that kind of absolute language. But to help with this, you could also put an image of 5 fingers on a hand up on the screen to help people focus on that rather than their own hand if you think that's going to be distracting in some ways. So when I did this prayer idea, I used it in an all-age service and found it was really helpful for different ages of people, because it can work in different ways. It's a mix of visual, being able to look at something, either your own hand or, as I said, an image on screen, but also kind of that movement aspect as well for people who need a bit more movement. You're doing something with your hand, you can either point to it, you could hold it, you can do the thumbs up, pointing, and so on. And you can also cater your prayers from a very short and simple prayer per finger, or much longer prayers, depending on your congregation and what works for them. Our next prayer idea is up, in, out. And again, for this idea, you don't need anything. So the idea of this prayer idea is that you start with praying up, which is focusing on God, praying prayers of praise, of thanksgiving, and so on. Then you pray in, focusing on ourselves, praying for things that we need. It could be prayers of confession, focusing on the things that we have done wrong, or it could be prayers for our church, our family, our immediate community. And then you pray out, praying for other people, praying for those around the world, those in need, lots of different things that we can pray for here. So I've used this prayer model and seen other people use it in both kind of a family service and in a more traditional liturgical style service too. It can be a prayer idea in and of itself, or it can simply be a framework for your prayers. If they're just more kind of normal written out prayers, you could still use this framework to help guide you through writing them. But if you do want to get your congregation more involved, you could get them to do different kinds of movement for the different prayers. So whether that's pointing up, in and out, or looking up, in and out. If you have a more interactive style service, you could get people to move around to different stations around your church that have different things for them to look at and focus on that represent up, in and out as well. And again, you can really easily cater these prayers for your congregation from just a sentence or two per up, in and out to much longer prayers. Our next prayer idea is to use actions or signs to help your prayers. So I've used lots of different variations of this prayer idea over the years in lots of different styles of service too. But the idea is basically to take your prayers, take the things that you want to be praying for, and split them into different points. And then for each point that you want to pray for, that you want to cover, you have an action or a sign to do to help people focus during that time. And depending on your congregation, it might just be you that does the sign, or you might be encouraging them to do the sign or the action along with you. And this could range from really simple actions, from kind of pointing at something, to much bigger motions or making noise or doing things like clapping their hands, stamping their feet. If you've got a much more energetic and lively congregation, you can get them up and doing something much more active. Whatever works best for your congregation and the kinds of prayers that you're wanting to do. Obviously, if you're doing very kind of calm, reflective prayers, then something big and energetic might not go so well with it. So you just want to think it through. But I find that this is a really simple way of keeping people's attention, giving them something to focus on as they pray. It gives them something to do with their hands, but it also helps them focus on what it is that they are praying for. A really important point here is that it is really important to make sure that you're being consistent with what it is that you're doing and really clear about what it is that you're doing. Are you doing actions? Are you doing sign language? Are you doing Makaton? Do not mix several of these things together, and make sure you are telling people what it is that you're doing so that you're not calling them something that they are not. If you are doing sign language or Makaton, make sure that you're doing the correct language for where you live. So for example, for me that would be BSL here in the UK, in America ASL, etc, etc. Make sure you know which sign language it is that you are using. And for both sign language and Makaton, make sure you are finding a reputable source from which to learn these different signs. Whether that's someone you know who already speaks sign language or uses Makaton themselves, or a reliable, reputable website that you can find that is teaching people how to use these signs themselves. Sometimes it can be useful to check a few different places just to make sure that what you're doing is correct, because that is really important. Although it's worth noting that there can be kind of several different signs for the same word. So again, just kind of investigate this, make sure you are confident that what you're doing is correct and not just you making something up. And our fifth prayer idea is map prayers. And for this, you need some maps and some highlighters. So for this prayer idea, you need to provide some maps and give them out to your congregation, and also give them some highlighters, and then encourage them to highlight the places as they pray for them. I did this prayer idea really recently in a family service, and I had a whole different range of maps, from a world map to Europe to the UK, and then some kind of our local area, our town and kind of the surrounding areas. And I got families and small groups to do this together so they could have a look at their map and think about and talk about the different places that they wanted to pray for. We actually did this in our candle mass service, so we were particularly thinking about God's light and where we wanted to shine God's light. So we particularly told people to highlight and pray for the places that they wanted to see God's light. So again, you could pray for things very specifically and tell people what it is that you want them to be praying for. Whether that's places that you want to see different kinds of peace, whether it's places you want to see kind of healing or people to come to know God. Lots of different options, but I would encourage you to make sure it's something that could be both worldwide and local at the same time. When I did this, I also provided a very short and simple prayer that people could say as they were highlighting a place. So for us, it was, "Dear God, bring your light in this place." A really easy sentence for people to remember and to pray just as they were highlighting each place. A top tip is to make sure you check your maps before you give them out. I found quite a few maps that had countries missing, particularly New Zealand a lot of the time, or like had potentially misnamed places, or the text wasn't very clear on the different images. So just make sure that you're choosing maps that are not going to distract people or offend people if their country is missing, for example. Also, if you have people in your congregation who you think might struggle to use a highlighter or might not enjoy that way of doing things, you could also have some big maps and some little kind of electric tea lights and just place a candle on the place that you're wanting to pray for. I think that could be another way of doing this that works really well, and could also be very kind of visually appealing to really show all these places that we're praying for if you do it on one big map. So those are our 5 different prayer ideas that we wanted to talk about today. I am hoping to create blog posts for each of these ideas, going into a bit more depth, more detail, resources, ideas, tips, anything that you might need to do these prayer ideas in your church. But hopefully this has given you some good ideas and a really good starting point to maybe try these out in your church. But do check the description or keep an eye on my blog if you would like to see those posts as they come out. Do let me know down in the comments which of these ideas you might like to try out in your church. Do also comment down below if you've got any questions about any of those prayers, and I'll see if I can help answer those. But we hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to see more videos from me and Arnold. And if you'd like to find some more tips and advice for writing your intercessions, do check out this video right here. And we will see you very soon for a new video. Bye!